Hello and welcome to Bright Wings, children's books to make the heart soar. I am your host, Charity Hill. The purpose of this conversation is to help mothers and fathers identify books that will liberate their children to embrace truth, goodness, and beauty. It is my great pleasure to welcome Marcie Stokman, the founder and president of the National Book Club Well-Read Mom, to Bright Wings Children's Books. Welcome, Marcie.
It's great to be here, Charity. Thanks for having me.
Marcie, I have been a member of Well-Read Mom since 2017, I believe. I wonder if you could tell Bright Wings listeners, what is Well-Read Mom?
Yes, Well-Read Mom is a book club for women. We hope to encourage women in reading great and worthy books and also grow in friendship and conversation and a sense of community.
Marcie, what need did you see amongst mothers? What made you say something must be done about this?
The need that I saw was that women weren't reading. I was one of them. I was giving some talks to mothers of preschoolers, and I just titled it Well-Read Mom. I wanted to see what women were reading. Gave these talks, but I found myself driving home sad because number one reason, I don't have time.
Women were saying they didn't have time to read.
Right. And I recognize that I was in the same boat, and I'm talking about quality literature. Maybe we can read a self-help book or something like that, but to read quality literature for its own sake, for our own continuing education, reading literature that helps us move toward what's good and beautiful and true and form our imaginations. Women did not have time. And so I drove home from these talks sad because I thought, well, now here's one more burden I'm putting on women and one more thing they're failing at that I pointed out. So I felt bad about that. And I realized I was in the same boat. I needed help to read well and to read more. I needed accountability. So 10 years ago, when my daughter was a new mom, and she called me one day and she said, Mom, I'm not going back to that mother's group. I've been there 3 times. And all they're talking about is what kind of diaper to buy. She said, isn't there a place after college where women get together and talk about the real questions of life? And at that time, I heard in her voice this cry for more, and this cry of loneliness. It pierced my heart because I had experienced that loneliness as a new mom. It can be excruciatingly lonely when you're home with a new baby and you don't have friends. You're maybe moved to a new city and you feel like you're on your own. In America, I think oftentimes we experience a kind of poverty that's a poverty of a communal life, poverty of sharing life with other women. So I saw that need. That's when I said something must be done.
Oh, Marcie, I really enjoy hearing that story. I encountered Well-Read Mom when my twins were 2. They had just been potty trained. I had started homeschooling, something that I never thought I'd want to do, but I decided that this was going to be a great thing. But unfortunately, I didn't really share a like-minded homeschooling community. And I had a kindergartner and a 3rd grader at home, and my husband had just started a new job, and we'd also just moved into a new house. And I had considered myself kind of a thinker, kind of an academic person. But honestly, I had not read anything other than like a parenting book in so many years by that point. I mean, okay, so perhaps I was trying to read, I actually do remember trying to read Kristen Lavransdatter when the twins were 1 year old, and it fell off that giant boppy one too many times. And I was so angry with that big, heavy book. I stopped in the middle.
But in this time of more intense need, I had less community than ever and less personal, quote unquote, intellectual engagement than ever.
All I was reading at that point when the twins were 2 and I was homeschooling, I was just completely occupied with the task at hand. And I would read Nancy Drew.
I could read a whole Nancy Drew in one evening between when the kids went to bed at 8 o'clock and when I went to bed at 11.
a friend bought me a membership in Well-Read Mom for the latter half of the year. I actually wasn't even with it for a full year. The first time that I joined, she spent $40 on me. And I was so uncomfortable with that because I would never have spent $40 on myself. And it was this really good thing. It really unbalanced me. Like I had to pay back what she did for me. And so I started a Well-Read Mom group to re-engage. And it really brought life to this group of moms that until that point, we had been mothers who knew each other from church or from school pickup, but we'd not really talked about anything important. But it really woke us up. It really allowed us to see past our hands, our hands that are folding laundry, our hands that are diapering children, our hands that are buckling car seats, our hands that are making dinner, our hands that are driving the van. It woke us up and it really changed our friendship, our association into friendship, into a real community. It taught us to think again. It was really transformative for that group of women.
Wow. The woman who donated that gift membership for you, that is the gift that keeps on giving. Because look at now you are writing the family supplement for us, Charity. And so many women are blessed by the children's selections that you help us, you point to for us to read to our own children and grandchildren during the year. But you're right. This literature is a springboard for conversation. You need something, you need something to get conversation directed in a meaningful way. Study after study shows people who engage in meaningful conversation are happier. So it links with our happiness. It links with getting to know sisters, friends, a sense of community. It's so much more than a book list. It's a way of moving through life with companions.
Yeah. Yes. Marcie, I'm wondering if you can talk about the act of courage that it took for you to start Well-Read Mom. There's a story I've heard about mailing those first Well-Read Mom invitations. I wondered if you would share that with me.
Oh, sure. I could remember it like it was yesterday. So, when I understood Beth's need, her deep need for friendships and meaningful conversation with other women, a place for that. And I understood my own need to read on a regular, consistent basis, quality literature. My need to have the bar raised and accountability there. Those two needs merged together. And Well-Read Mom was born. We had the name right there, Well-Read Mom. And I said, Beth, let's read really good books together. Let's do this. Let's set up a 5-year plan. I'll put together a book list. You're busy with a newborn, so I can write questions and introduce the book and the audio. Let's really do this and let's do it well. And so my daughter-in-law, Steph, made these invitations that were beautiful. And Beth was going to send them to her friends and I'd send them to mine. And so I had 22 invitations made out for the kickoff of Well-Read Mom in the fall of 2012. And on our main street in Crosby, we have this blue mailbox by the post office. And I gripped these invitations tight. And I went to the post office and I stuck my arm in 3/4 of the way. And then I was paralyzed with fear because it just hit me, if I let go of these invitations, this is really going to happen. Like someone might come, these women might come, and who am I? Who do I think I am to invite women to a book club where I pick the books, I'm going to introduce the books, and I'm going to give a talk in my living room? I'm thinking, this is crazy. I'm not a literary expert. Who do I think I am? And so I held tightly to these postcards. And then my reason came into play. And I thought, you know what? These books, they weren't written for people with PhDs. They were written for ordinary people like me.
So what gave you the courage to let go of those postcards was the hope that there were other women out there like you.
I invited 22 people.
Wow.
And 22 women showed up, and Well-Read Mom was born.
Wow. Wow. That was a lot of seeds you put in the mailbox. In fact, how many, I mean, that little handful of seeds you put in the mailbox, how many women are now coming to Well Read Mom? You don't have an exact count because
we really ask people to register to become a member so they can experience the beautiful materials that we've put together. And we also can give scholarships. So we encourage everyone to become a member. But we just are over 3,400 members now. It is wonderful because when women read more, everyone reads more. I mean, women are the culture builders, and women are, to create a culture of life, women have a role to play in so many ways. And one of them is through reading books that cultivate and educate our imagination in a moral way. This is a tremendous potential for us as women. We're staying together in little communities all over the United States, reading the same books at the same time, which allows us to have conversation and dialogue with friends or sisters from another state. And it just creates a space for conversation, and it creates a space for, I believe, cultural change.
I think having a more humane, a more beautiful culture begins with our microcultures, our microclimates. I know when we first started our Well Read Mom group, it was awkward at first. We were afraid to have opinions. We were afraid to offer our interpretation. We were kind of wondering if it was okay. In a certain sense, we became a trusting, risk-taking community.
I have the faces of so many women in mind. We lived in Illinois when I first started with Well Read Mom, and now I'm in Texas. I have the faces of so many women in my mind that I feel like that I should thank you on behalf of all these particular faces for doing this, because it's really allowed women to pay attention to their heart. And I know that's one of the features that you hope for with Well Read Mom. I'm curious to know how Well Read Mom has helped you to care for your own heart. It's obviously created a lot of tasks for you as well, but how has reading helped you care for your heart? Have you read a particular novel lately that's caused a change in you, or has rested you, or consoled you? What have you read that has made a difference lately?
So first I'll talk about this taking care of your heart, and then I'll tell you about a book. Take care of your heart. That has something to do that is so integral to Well Read Mom. It began like this because I didn't understand what it was to take care of my heart. And I didn't understand that it had a connection with how I mothered, the relationships that were fostered with my children. And it happened this way. I think I had 7 kids at the 7 children, just a busy household. Everyone was home, and your life is so full. And at this point, I was running to everything my kids were in. And that day, a couple of boys were running a cross-country meet. And I'm driving along to this cross-country meet. And I remember thinking, I cannot keep going on like this. I am burnt out. I'm on empty. And no one in this family understands it. That's where I was emotionally. I was on empty. And I stopped at this Caribou Coffee, and I ordered this large latte, and I sat in this coffee shop and I stared at the wall. And I thought to myself, if I don't get up right now and get going, I'm going to miss John and Phil's meet. And I kept staring at the wall, and I missed his meet. The sad thing is, it was the only meet that John ever won.
Oh, darn.
So, yeah, I know. And I missed it. But anyway, a couple of weeks later, I'm talking to my friend from Italy, and she said something to me that would change my whole concept of mothering. I told her, I said, I just kept staring at the wall. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And she said, you American mothers, you think being a mom is about running to everything your kids are in. And of course, I'm thinking yes. And certainly that's part of it. But then she said these words that would change me. She said, take care of your heart. That's how you mother. And she spoke this to me with authority, and it sort of pierced through my heart. And I thought, she's speaking truth, but I don't know what it is to take care of my heart. What does taking care of my heart really have to do with mothering? So I had to explore that. I became curious about taking care of my heart and being a mom. This summer, I was speaking in Indiana. I ran into a woman who was her first year in Well-Read Mom. And I said, what's your experience been? I mean, can you tell me something about your first year? And she said, well, what really surprised me is how it's changed my relationship with my teenage daughter. And I said, say more. What do you mean? And she said, we were so strained out. And she said, I started reading these books. And for some reason, my perspective on things started to widen. And I started to understand her perspective in a new way. And I started to kind of have a space where maybe, just maybe, we could have a conversation. She said, I can't say one particular book that's helped, but this whole experience of reading on a regular basis. And, this is documented. Reading literature helps us grow in empathy. It helps us walk in another person's shoes for a while. And it even lights up the area in our brain where, if we were experiencing this ourselves, it helps us grow in our experience of what it is to be human and the human condition. And so I really think it creates a space in our life to live with the members of our family with more capacity to accept the other, more capacity to stay with the other in times of tension, and also to forgive. So this, again, was a verification that taking care of our heart has something to do with how we mother and the quality of relationships that we can experience with our children, with our spouse, with our friends.
I really like hearing how it wasn't a self-help book that she was able to perfectly implement that really changed her relationship with her daughter. It was fiction. I like that story about the woman from Indiana that way.
Mm-hmm.
I like it because how many times have I tried to implement something in a very important parenting book, and I just have not been able to change maybe my own behaviors. These books are all about doing things differently in order to change your situation, right? I think so often with fiction, what we see is it changes me. It changes me from the inside, and then I can act differently. I see my situation, I see my relationships differently, and I can act with a greater largeness, a greater mercy towards the people in my life.
Right. And the last book we read for Year of the Artist was Crime and Punishment, which, as you know, it's a hefty book. And if you've read it, you're in the mind of this killer for about 600 pages. And I'm reading along, kind of enjoying it. But at a certain point, I'm thinking, what am I really getting out of this? I mean, this guy he's sort of crazy, this Raskolnikov. And he wants to step over this crime that he's committed because he thinks he's above the law. In the end, he comes to realize he can't step over. He's not above God's laws. He has to come clean. He has to reconcile. I closed that book and I picked up my Year of the Sister reading companion. And I saw those sisters on the cover carrying water from the well. And I was sad because, well, it had been a hard year for me with the women in my parish. We had some split even because of some decisions with COVID that people felt differently about. And so it was a painful year with some of the sisters in my parish, one in particular. I thought, this is sad because it's Year of the Sister, and man, it's been so hard. I thought about Raskolnikov, who thought he could step over, and it hit me all of a sudden. That's what you think you can do, Marcie. You think you can step over God's laws with your sister that you're in conflict with. And I understood that I had prayed for her. I had prayed for myself. I had done everything to going to that sister and saying, look, this happened. You felt one way. I felt another. You know what? Our relationship as sisters is way more than this situation. it's so much deeper. And I am so sorry that I hurt you. She's told me she was sorry. We hugged, we cried. That crazy book, Crime and Punishment, I enjoyed it, but I thought, how can this really help me? In the end, taught me that I can't step over God's laws. I need to move my feet in the right way in relationships. So that was a surprise to me that book helped me move to see the sister and ask forgiveness.
Marcie, you use this phrase, the moral imagination, that what we read shapes our moral imagination. This phrase, moral imagination, what does it mean? What is it?
Human beings are unique because we have a capacity to imagine. So, your dog Fido is not sitting there thinking, look at these stars. I wonder who made them. Your dog isn't pondering the universe. Your dog isn't asking why. But human beings have this capacity to imagine, and that allows us to live with a sense of wonder. And we do ask questions about the meaning of life when we're not too distracted, right? And that's what reading these kind of books brings forth. The questions are so important to be asking. And as we read, we are educating our imagination in one way or another. And the goal is to educate it in a moral way. And the British philosopher Edmund Burke is the one I read who first defined the moral imagination. And here's how he defined it. Quote, the moral imagination aspires to the apprehending of right order in the soul and right order in the commonwealth, end quote. So I want my soul to be ordered in the right way. That's true to the way reality really works, right? That's true to God's laws. Like there are consequences to sin. There are consequences to forgiveness that help us move toward greater community, greater love for one another, or that divide us further. The moral imagination can be educated in a way that moves us to what is good, true, and beautiful. Or it can be educated in a way that's diabolical.
Personal and social destruction and chaos.
A lot of the movies today or books out there move the imagination in that way. But to raise the bar is to say, no, let's read books that move us to what is good, true, and beautiful, or move us to recognize what's evil so that we can make changes and in our own life and be impacted by the story. So we're part of a story, the great story. I'm a Christian, and that is the story of history, right? The story of life. Rightly ordered imaginations help us perceive that God is at work in everything. And so literature is a way to help us cultivate and grow in a moral imagination, an imagination that is educated in a way that's moral and true and can see right from wrong.
That is such an interesting thing. I didn't realize it was Edmund Burke that you were drawing on for that. I've been thinking, because I've heard you use this phrase moral imagination, I've been thinking about it for some time and not knowing how you were using it. I was coming up with my own rationale as to what it could possibly mean. Here on Bright Wings, I talk about, the great questions that literature helps us to ask and the answers that it proposes to us. The great questions of who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? What good must I do? The moral question of what good must I do? Or when the character is confronted by a problem and must act, right? That's where we kind of see that question arise. What good must I do? What must I do here? I've been thinking about the question of the moral imagination being one in which when we read fiction, we can't live all lives, but when we read fiction, we can try on through our imagination, the ethical framework of another person. Like Atticus Finch says, we can climb into another person's skin and walk around in it.
And this is possible because analogies in my mind are tied to realities in the actual world.
And this allows us to make decisions for our own life about who do I want to imitate? Who do I want to be like? Did I admire this character and their choices Did I admire their virtue? Did I admire their courage? Did I admire their gentleness when faced with, when confronting evil, or when confronting a trouble or a problem, when confronting adversity? So that's what I've been doing with the phrase moral imagination, is thinking about it as an imaginative way to try on different choices.
Oh, I think you're exactly right, Charity. It gives you a chance to do that. I believe there's so much we can gain from recognizing that through the imagination, truth can be communicated. It's a means to communicate truth. We can have our children memorize the 10 Commandments, for example. But when my 19-year-old daughter read Anna Karenina and saw the consequences of adultery and saw all the problems that came even into the community through that choice, she was educated in her imagination. Do not commit adultery. She saw the complexities that arose from that choice. So yeah, it's a means of communicating truth.
The mission of Well-Read Mom, Marcie, is for mothers, for women, not necessarily only mothers, but adult women. But us mothers and grandmothers can't read or have an idea or a beautiful experience that we don't also want to share with our children and grandchildren, right? And being mothers, we can't help but want to share life and to share the flourishing that we're experiencing in Well-Read Mom. I think because of this, Well-Read Mom developed the family supplement, which is the small part of Well-Read Mom that I'm helping with. I participate in this much smaller part of Well-Read Mom's mission called the family supplement. What I'm doing for Well-Read Mom in the family supplement work is to help create a family-wide conversation. The mothers have a particular book that they're reading. And so I have selected a picture book and a middle grade fiction work that correspond.
So the picture book, the middle grade novel, and the book that the mothers are reading all share a theme.
One of the themes might be forgiveness, or the healing power of beauty, or families facing adversity. And they can bring up this idea in a way that's scaled to fit, because the children have access to a picture book on this idea, on this theme, as well as a middle grade fiction work.
So along with choosing the books, I also write summaries of them so the mothers and fathers know what the content of the book is. And I write questions that inspire reflection and conversation.
Yeah, we've had great response from women, how they have enjoyed taking. Now, this is the first year, Charity. You've done this a couple of years now, but this is the first year the family supplement is included in the companion and not just somewhere on the website that you can't quite get to or find. So this year it's in the supplement. You can have it in your purse, take it to the library, or, it's handy. The questions are right there. I think it's not too overwhelming. This is so wonderful. It's something I can actually do, for example, with my grandkids. I can read these two things to them. I love that it's not too overwhelming. It's really workable. You've done a great job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, when a mother just starts, I know that as mothers, when we started to come alive in a new way through Well-Read Mom, it's just part of being a mother that you want to give out the goodness that you've received. I love that there's this aspect of Well-Read Mom. I mean, the focus continues to be the mothers, but I'm so proud to be part of making these beautiful ideas part of a family conversation. Marcie, I have the faces of the women in my book club, in my mind here as I think about all of us moms out there who love books and who love our children. And we wonder about you. We wonder about, how did reading shape your family? How did reading inform your relationships? Do you have a story to share with us about how is literature part of your mothering experience?
Well, Charity, when I grew up, we did not have books in the home. We had one book. It was the Golden Children's Bible. And my mom read to us from that, which was really, if you've got one book in your home and it's the Bible, that's fantastic. But she would read to it, and there were wonderful illustrations. And I remember many a nap falling asleep with the Golden Children's Bible on my chest. That was a tremendous gift to me. But we also lived close to a library. My mom would send us to the library. So my three sisters and I would walk to the library almost every day, Monday through Friday, and explore books. And it was such a gift to live that close to the library and frequent it often because I became familiar with books. And then when I had my own children, I was able to educate myself more on children's literature and recognize it takes an education. You don't just go to, Target and find these books. They're really hidden from people. It's hard to know what books are worthy books to read. So to find a supplement that helps you in that or helps educate mothers, I think I read Honey for a Child's Heart, and there were other books that helped me find books to read to my kids. But I believe so firmly in reading to them on a regular basis. And was able to do that. I really believe that was a gift I was able to give them. It also helped us bond. There's a closeness when you're reading.
Do you have an unofficial canon of must reads from the Stokman house? Were there books that all the children in your family read, your children read? Like, I think in my own family, there was some Wilson Rawls, like Where the Red Fern Grows, Summer of the Monkeys. We read the Little House books, Little Women, Anne of Green Gables, Black Stallion. Like all the children in my family read those books, I think. Maybe
Yes.
my brothers didn't read Little Women. They would have been better off if they had, but...
No, all those books were important. I remember I'm reading Summer of the Monkeys with my kids in the car. My husband's driving, and we get to this part in the story where we all begin to weep. The kids are crying, asking me to stop reading because they can't take the pain of the situation in this book. They're saying, stop. We pulled over to the side of the road and we all have Kleenex. It was just a moment of recognizing that we were all experiencing this together, how beautiful it was when he, uses the money that he gets from that she can have this leg surgery on her leg. Do you remember that? Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a way to bond with my kids. I think it unified us as a family. You have kind of a core that you can draw from in conversations with one another, and you know what you're talking about with each other.
Marcie, do you have any stories that you read as a teen that were important to you?
I remember having a senior slide year. I dropped out of a couple classes my senior year, and I was involved in a great deal of extracurricular in sports. So I kind of took it easy with the class load. And so there I had 2 hours free every day. But I found my way to the library and read for 2 hours every day. And I went through the library shelves, taking books off the shelves. And, it was such a rich education for me to have that chance as a senior to read 2 hours a day. I think it's pretty rare, actually. Like studies show the older kids get, the less they read.
The less they're actually reading
oftentimes.
books. Yes.
So it actually was a gift to me. And I remember picking A Tree Grows in Brooklyn off the shelf and sitting there my senior year at this table in the library. And I was transported to Brooklyn. And I was Francie, who loved to read. And I saw what was going on during that time period in the 1920s and 30s and in our country. And I was transported right there. Oh, it was just such a privilege and such a joy to discover these books in that high school library. It's sad for me because a lot of libraries are digital. It's a different kind of experience now. But taking a book and holding it in your hand and having that experience is such a gift.
What have been some of your favorite books to read with your grandchildren? That's a new thing, to be back to picture books.
Right. I of course love Goodnight Moon and Runaway Bunny and, I'm looking right now, the Winnie the Pooh books. Actually, I need to do better reading to my grandkids. I need to do it because we had The kids honored me for my birthday, the grandkids. And what they said about me was, I love when you read to me. I was struck because they all said it. And I'm thinking, wow, I need to make sure I actually do this because it means a lot to them. So ask me next time, Charity, because I want to improve in that area. I really do.
Okay. That's humble of you to say that, Marcie. I have to say, it's by far the most important activity my children do with my mom. It's a major way that they connect with Granny and feel loved.
I have a little grandson who I'm going to do some physical therapy with this year, and I'm going to be reading to him on a regular basis, and I am just looking forward to it so much. I can't wait to hold him and really again, I need accountability. So I need accountability and to do the really good things in life.
Oh, well, we all need it.
You hold me accountable, Charity, so that I read these family supplement books for grandkids. Everyone believes in the kind of the magical beauty of reading, and yet it's so easy not to do. It's so easy to, let it slide. And before you know it, half a year goes by. And so anyway, I appreciate any accountability I can get.
I mean, honestly, we all need that accountability. I have a podcast on children's literature, and it's hard for me to make sure. Well, it's hard for me to feel like I am doing enough for them, even though I have this podcast on children's literature.
So it keeps me honest. In part, this podcast is part of my accountability.
I try to find little ways to offer them this treasure.
But I don't have to be perfect at this, and I'm not going to be.
Yes, I'm an amateur. I have a passion for reading, but I am not an expert. And guess what? I don't need to be. I don't need to understand this theory or this or that. I just am following this desire that reading good and worthy books helps me live a more beautiful life. And also, Charity, people are different times in family life, you don't have time to read. I had 7 kids and my mom was sick and my health was going through some things and my dad died. I mean, I could not read for a period of time. And that's what was being asked of me in my life at that point. Don't feel guilty if you can't read for even chunks of time. But the idea is to maintain and develop a reading habit when you can and when you're given this space and carve time for it. Sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can. And we need to be diligent with those times that we can to really develop habits that move us to consistently read.
So one of the things I've resolved to do lately is to bring like a book of fairy tales in the car and just leave it in the car all the time, so that in these in-between times, instead of looking at stuff on my phone or something, we have something to read. And that's much more meaningful and is a better way to be together.
Charity, and that reminds me, another book my kids really liked, and this one surprised me. It was called Tanglewood Tales by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So he writes, rewrites maybe in his own style, the Greek myths and other stories. So they were on the edge of their seat with that one. And there's no pictures. And I remember being surprised by that. And also with my grandkids, what I've been able to do is pull down some books with great artwork. Mm-hmm. And we flip through the pages and look at paintings, and they point things out or I notice things. And it's just a slowed down way to take in and receive the beauty of a painting, sit with them and actually look at it and receive it. Right.
That's wonderful. Right. You're doing that. Give voice to the story that the painting is telling and notice and perceive the details and talk it over. I love doing that.
Right. Well, this will encourage me to do it more.
Oh, Marcie, thank you so much for having this conversation today. We all want to know more about where well-read mom came from in your life and the stories that were part of your life that shaped you and that gave rise to this beautiful mission to women, creating life and culture for women in families in our homes. Marcie, thank you very much for telling us more of your story.
It's been a delight to be here today, Charity. Thank you so much, and God bless your work.
Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Marcie Stokman here on Bright Wings Children's Books. I hope we've encouraged you to take care of your heart. I hope we have encouraged you to find communities that are life-giving, that are reflective, that help you live deeply, and help you to know that you are not alone. You need that, and that's what we're doing, facilitating your mother culture. If you'd like to keep reflecting on some of the things related to this conversation, I included a couple of links in the show notes. 2 are articles, and 1 is a book list for the various books that we talked about in the podcast. One of the articles is on how reading literary fiction improves the theory of mind, which means reading improves your mental state in such a way that it enables you to have better social relationships. The other article I've linked is one called The Erosion of Deep Literacy by Adam Garfinkel. It describes how deep literacy has wondrous effects that, quote, nurture our capacity for abstract thought, enabling us to pose and answer difficult questions, empowering our creativity and imagination, and refining our capacity for empathy. The article also warns us what we are losing by not reading deeply. With great gratitude and affection, I dedicate this podcast to Saifa Skeen, the woman who bought me that gift subscription to Well Read Mom those years ago. All right, mamas and daddies, go where the life is.